Okay, you guys are good. It's been a while. How's everyone doing?
Good.
Good, good. Um, well, welcome, guys. This is really your first continuation of interest-based bargaining. I guess I'm going to paraphrase the way I think you all thought about it was, you're not going to bring forth, new proposals today and start bargaining your next contract immediately, but you wanted to at least start to meet monthly to perhaps dig in a little to the issues that you didn't get to and really be up and working as a group when it comes time to start entering into negotiations for a new contract. Am I saying that right in terms of what your intent is with this monthly meeting?
Yes, and also, this is Jill. Also, I think our group has been fielding lots of questions just from the staff after getting updates on, scheduling and how the start of the year is going to look and all that. So we, again, as we have in the last few meetings, have some more questions to talk about, discuss. But what you said earlier is true. Yeah, we're going to start our monthly meetings to kind of get a jump start, I guess, if you will, on next year's agreement.
And you guys will be like, you already were sort of working like a pretty well-oiled machine by the time you were finished with your last contract. So I think it just gets you all used to just better and better at the process. Well, so let me tell you, so speaking of, and I know I very last minute kind of today, I sent just the bones of a potential agenda for how you all want to use your time tonight. But I think I'm hearing Jill say you may want to use some of the time just to communicate about some things that are just out there now that feel like they need to be addressed, and you're all together. So let me just let me screen share the agenda. You guys tell me if it makes sense and what order you want to do what. I will tell you that I started with just any updates from around the room. I'm pulling up a Word doc here in a sec. So I thought the number one agenda item can be, and by the way, we can move this based on what you may want to talk about that's more time sensitive, but just if anybody that's not been together or not been engaged around some issues that you just want to flag for folks that you're engaged in, or just any quick updates from around the room, perhaps that may be where some of the questions that the teachers are fielding, maybe that gets brought up after you sort of hear an update from around the room that may include a COVID update. So that's number one on the agenda. Number two, all I was going to do was a quick review, just make sure that whether it be Rachel, whether it be Lindsay, whoever's your note taker, make sure you guys do have a folder that's got those 2 or 3 remaining issues from the last contract cycle that you just didn't get to, so that you don't lose those and that you have that folder to look at for building future agendas. And then the third thing that I had on the agenda was I was going to have you guys start talking about the negotiation process, which was an issue statement. I wanted to have you guys break down into small teams, small groups, maybe 3 small groups. And I wanted you all to sort of talk about what do you feel like went well in the process and why? And then what do you all feel like as a team and in the process you can improve? And if there are ideas on how to improve, maybe we report back to each other as the bigger group and then brainstorm. Are there some ideas for improvement you want to solidify and commit to? Are there things you did well you want to memorialize and flag to continue doing? So I think that is going to lead you to look at that negotiation process issue statement, and after the discussion, see if there's action to be taken on it. Maybe there's not. Maybe there is. So I'm going to put that agenda up, and then again, I'm recommending that you all maybe do the questions and concerns that Jill said you may want to have a discussion around. Could be under updates, and it can go as long as you need it to. I'm looking, there we go. So with that, I'll be quiet, have you look at the screen, tell me what you think. Well, I've got any quick updates. I don't remember if you guys said a standing COVID update would be part of these meetings. It sort of was the part of your last meeting. And Jill, when you're talking about questions, are they related to back to school / COVID?
Yes.
So I'll give folks a chance to look. And if it makes sense, I don't want anybody to feel like we're just going to sort of start drilling with questions, but perhaps if anybody's got any sort of update they want to give in their world, right? Anything in their world, and then also a COVID update. And then it sounds like in Jill's world or the building rep or, association leaders world is lots of questions. So thumbs up if this looks like the agenda for tonight. Any additions, anything else that's time sensitive that needs to be flagged to make sure we don't miss it?
Can I do a housekeeping item really quickly? Thank you.
Yeah?
Can I do a housekeeping item really quickly? Is everybody
Please.
comfortable? I already did it. I should have asked first. Okay, so in our negotiations team shared folder, I thought it might be helpful to go ahead and put everything for our negotiations for the current P&A in its own folder. And then we can just start in that shared folder with everything for this year. And just keep, that way we all keep and we still have access to all of our documents for last year's, but then we're not mixing the 2 years up. So if we need to refer to anything in that folder this year or years from now, everybody still has access to it, but then we can just use that major negotiations team shared folder for here on forward.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
create a new folder for 21, 22.
Yeah, we can, you want to do a new folder for that? I can do that, okay.
And then, because then we can just move
Yeah.
the couple things that we've started.
I wonder too if we should keep maybe within that, I don't know, I feel like the 2021 discussions, if we're discussing things, we should maybe, because I
Copy
feel
'em.
like we're crossing the line between monthly discussions and negotiating. And I feel like we need to keep those two things separately, because I think we're willing to discuss whatever, but not necessarily negotiate everything that we discuss. Like for example, if COVID updates are going to be part of this each time, I would like to have a record of that or like some minutes of that. So if we can go back and say, COVID's probably not a good example, but if we talked about something else, calendar maybe, or something that we weren't necessarily negotiating, it would be nice to have those minutes, but I also don't want to cross over our discussions and what we're negotiating. Does that make sense?
Yeah, in my opinion, like, anything that we do from now on should be in the 21, 22.
I know when we started this process earlier in the summer, we marked things as either like going to go through the whole IBB process, or if they were going to be more discussion, or if they, so I don't know, is that kind of what you're thinking we should do, Michelle?
Yeah, I just feel like, are we saying that right now, anything we discuss, we wouldn't even consider until 21, 22? Because if that's the case, then I'm fine with that. But if we have discussions in here that we're going to adjust for the current school year, just in practice, I don't think we should be identifying at 21, 22.
Oh, I see. So you don't think we should put it in the 21, 22 folder if it's something that we're going to discuss and maybe be able to problem solve like now as opposed to waiting till
Or maybe
next
have
year?
clearly delineated folders of like discussion topics, notes.
I think
I
we
mean,
could
I
have
think-
maybe a 2021 discussion topics and then a 21, 22 potential negotiations.
I think though for clarity of like note taking, thinking like Rachel and I, like that would include keeping two separate running notes within, two separate documents of, okay, well now we're jumping to a negotiated topic and then let me jump back to a discussion topic. I think within the notes, it would be pretty clear, like we're deciding on something, that we're going to implement now, or we're deciding on something that would be part of ratification for 21, 22.
And I understand that. And I think for us, it's going to be very clear. What I worry about is 2 or 3 years down the road when we're like, oh, remember we talked about that. Let's go back and look. And we're going to be looking for something that was changed potentially in 2021 as far as practice goes. And we're going to find it because it's going to be in a 21-22 folder.
I'm wondering if maybe, because I had thoughts along the same lines that Dr. Hubbard did. I wonder maybe if that's something we brainstorm on in our small groups is how do we delineate things that we feel like are negotiable topics, discussion topics? Is there a need to do that, for example, before March 31st even? You know, how can we feel like we get an opportunity to discuss everything that NEA wants to bring to the table while the district also doesn't feel like they've consented to negotiate something that we might take the position is not negotiable, but still something we would want to have a discussion about and talk about and hear about?
Well, we could leave everything that we start now out of a folder completely until we've come to an agreement and then put it in the year that it goes in.
Like the TAs, maybe,
Yeah.
or clearly labeled the TAs. This is a TA that is a contractual provision. This is a TA that's a discussion topic.
Well, and I think maybe we just need to look at how we're doing our folder in general. Because it's broke down currently as team and then it goes straight into the year. We're better file management, maybe break it down to meetings, you know, TAs and those things, and then inside of those have years. So that if you're looking for a meeting note, you go to the meeting, you're going to find it fairly easy that way. I think, you know, we just got to figure out a file management thing that works for us. And I think that, you know, it's going to be one of those two where we talk and say something does come up from COVID that we need a MOU on. We know that that's then going to be placed in, if we did it now, it would be placed in the 2021 MOU folder.
I like the idea of kicking it around in smaller groups and then bringing that back to the whole. I think that's a good
fine.
suggestion.
I'm just in general, organization and clarifying our issues as contractual or discussion or
Right.
otherwise.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that there's a lot of issues that we may have that don't come to contractual language.
And I'd like to have a setup that allows us to successfully feel like we have the freedom. And I would just say as we go into our small groups, I certainly have an interest in never having to like be a bad guy and say, well, I don't think that's mandatorily negotiable or not. I'd rather not even have to go there. I'd rather us have the freedom to do it and have those discussions without me having to come in and have a discussion about, you know, whether something's mandatorily or negotiable or not. And I think that there's a way we can set that up.
I think the idea of having a discussion in your small groups, just don't let it dominate all the other things you want to flag that worked well or that need improving. And what I'm hearing you guys say is you may have communication and even collaborate or problem solve. It may just be simple communication. It may be collaboration and problem solving on things that aren't necessarily going to be a MOU or a TA, right? Either you feel like that, you know, making a contract language, even if it's negotiable, may be too big of a hammer for the issue, right? Or you're going to say, well, it's not really something we generally put in the contract or not negotiable, but let's talk about it. So is that what you're saying? Basically, it's going to be hard to pre-predict, you know, without knowing what your issues are going to be that you put on the agenda for the next year. It's going to be hard to kind of make that hard judgment call ahead of time. This may start to sort of work itself out, your organization tool, as you do the work, right? You may end up with something that's just a communication file, perhaps, you know. But so, yeah, I would say, I think it was Mike that said, talk about it in your small groups and make sure that when we report back from small groups, you say what thoughts you have on it at this point. Make sense?
Yes.
Before we get to a COVID update, does anyone else want to give any update from what's going on in their world? In any way, shape or form, just anything you want to just say, hey, an FYI, or just anything you want to share. And then, I don't know if it makes sense for Michelle, we just sort of always call on you kind of impromptu. If you want to give us a COVID update, or if you just want to take questions to make it more specific. But anybody else have anything before we get to that?
My COVID update is that me and my wife bought a pop-up camper on the line of COVID craziness. So there.
Congratulations.
That's exciting.
Wait, I want to do that. Say more about that. Is this COVID related? Or is it just get the heck out of town?
I've been seeing and hearing a lot of like really positive feedback, so wanted to shout out the SPED department. They've been doing a couple sessions for SPED teachers to attend WebEx meetings to just kind of wrap their brain around some of the changes, and that's been really positive. So shout out to the SPED department for that.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Lindsay. Sherry Dumeline's kind of amazing.
She's
and
amazing.
I don't think she's slept for a month, so she's doing her best.
Everybody was super appreciative to kind of get a heads up and get their brains wrapped around things ahead of time.
That's great.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and just to Dr. Fulton and the team and the Board of
Yeah.
Education for deciding to start, by taking in the gating criteria and the way that it's, the way that we interpret it, and starting remote. I know that there's other districts around that are choosing not to use that gating criteria, so.
Major snaps.
There's a lot of pressure, a lot of different directions.
Yes, we're,
So,
we've seen that.
yeah, I think
Time
we
will
have a
tell,
great
I guess.
board and strong leadership, and we will get through this school year together. I'm trying to think. I don't know if anything else. Anyone else? Any COVID updates?
Living my life.
Okay.
Okay, so would you
No,
like?
Michelle's trying to talk, but she's on mute.
Oh, Michelle.
There I go.
Okay.
I don't really have an update per se. I mean, I could give one, but I think it would be more productive and better for our time if we just answered specific questions.
Cool. Okay.
And with that,
Here we go.
All right, so I know some of the plans, when we do end up getting into hybrid, which will be, down the road at some point, having students report directly to the classrooms is kind of part of the plan, and it's a bit of a new thing this year. Typically, teachers had like a little bit of time, at least at the beginning of their contract day, without students, so if they needed to make a call, make a copy, go to the bathroom, et cetera, something like this. So it's not like in violation necessarily of the agreement or anything, because there's a spot that says before the students start their day, the teachers can can be asked to supervise the coming and going of students. So there were just some people that were concerned like that if they needed to do something at, like for middle school, it's from 8:05 to 8:45, that morning time. If they needed to be able to like make a copy or go to the bathroom or do something, is there a plan, or, this is probably more for principals, but continuing to supervise, students, what do I want to say, like right when you get there, and then start your day. So maybe that's something we could talk with like Michelle and the principals on, if there would be a way like,
What is that
To
time
stagger
called,
it.
Jill?
I don't really know what it's
Called
called.
arrival time, or what
It's-
is that?
just duty time before the school day,
Yeah.
I think.
And where are kids typically, like,
All over.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
Yeah.
in the past.
So just as a review, typically they might be in a gym, you might,
Right.
or
Correct, yeah.
cafeteria, you might have all the kids report to the cafeteria until 8:20, and then a bell would ring and release them wherever. It looks a little bit different in each building depending on what happens, but unfortunately, I mean, and I just want to reiterate that teams of teachers helped create these plans. So I think that's important to note here, that we had a problem and we had to solve the problem, and a group of, teachers, administrators, counselors, social workers, all gathered together to create these plans, because we can't have large groups of kids in places. And so I don't know a way around that, Jill. I mean,
I don't think we're asking for a way around that. I think we just want to have ability for some people to be available to say, I need to go make some copies, for somebody to come in and wait. I also, to me, when I read the contract, it says, supervise the coming and going. I look at that as bus duty and that kind of stuff, and having continued supervision before the day starts is slightly different. And so in my opinion, it was one of those things like, let's talk about it, and maybe if we need to for this year, come up with a plan for this year that allows that. I just don't ever want to be in that spot of where it feels like, well, we did it that year and we're just going to continue to do it down the road, and change the definition of what the P&A says to me. And I think that's the more of it to me, is like, we know that needs to be done. Let's have some thought of how we can help some people when they need to. But also let's have an understanding that this is for this year.
well, and I think that, obviously the reopening plan is for this year. It clearly states it's a 2021 reopening plan. I'm not reading into it that it's a long-term thing at all. And I don't, the fact that it's dated for me would say that that's what it is. But I think my concern is, I hear you and I understand the concern. I just don't know who that is, because I think it's going to take all hands on deck in all these different locations to ensure that we don't end up with 20 kids standing there with no masks on, doing what they're not supposed to be doing. You're going to have administrators. You're going to have secretaries. You're going to have everybody at different doors and different locations. And so I think I can encourage principals to work with teachers and try to maybe have a floater that can help with some of those things. But I just don't know. I don't know that we can guarantee there's going to be somebody available if a teacher needs to make a copy. I don't know how we can ensure that. I'm open to suggestions, and I'll take whatever suggestions you guys may have, but I just worry that it's going to take all hands on deck.
Right. Yeah, and I guess, the plan does have a year on it, 2020, 2021.
And
So,
I think from a building perspective, if I put my principal hat on, I would work with our staff, right, on trying to find those floaters. But I agree with Dr. Hubbard too. We don't know what we don't know. We don't know what issues are going to be that we're going to have to manage. But, to try to create those at the secondary level, those teachers are on plan. Well, maybe we can use those as floaters and some paras and things like that. But yeah, no one can envision exactly what that environment's going to look like when kids start rolling into the building. So,
right.
I also don't know how many kids will be in there. Some parents may choose to really just drop off at the time, because I don't want my kids hanging out in those groups, right? And there's going to be a lot less kids in the building, generally speaking. So I think one of those things too is we kind of probably need to see what it looks like and then come back to this discussion if it's something that's not manageable, or maybe it's going to work really well.
Can you get closer to your mic, Dr. Hubbard?
That means I'm gonna have to.
No, we don't need your face to be closer. We just need your voice to be.
I don't know how to get closer to the mic.
That's actually better.
That's good.
Maybe just talk louder. Thank you.
Okay.
Use that teacher voice.
Her mom voice is scarier.
I don't need to be scared right now. I just want to hear.
Okay.
here.
So this one's good because we are starting in remote. If I need a substitute because I am sick, or, I don't know, have a doctor's appointment, for some reason.
Available to teach remotely.
No, I mean, we are all teaching remote.
I'm saying if I'm unavailable to
Yes,
teach
thank you,
remotely.
thank you. Do we still get the sub through Kelly Services, and how will that look? Will they have to like
Yes.
present
Yes.
our videos? Or?
Yeah, so having some initial discussions with principals, but yes, the current thinking is if you're unable, because you're ill or whatever, to teach your remote class, that you would put in for a substitute through Kelly. They are training all of their substitutes within Canvas. The initial plan was just to train a pool, but now the plan is to train all of them with Canvas. And then the current thinking, and we haven't finalized this yet, is if I'm a remote substitute, to ensure connectivity, technology, and all of those pieces, we would ask that sub to report to the physical building so that we could issue them a laptop. They would have connectivity, all of those different pieces, be able to touch base with the principal, things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess we could probably like leave most of our plans in Canvas, you know, because if the kids have been working with us,
Yep.
you know, through that app.
And the sub would have access then to our Canvas?
That was a question that one of the principals brought up, and we haven't I honestly haven't worked through that. I think, Dr. Hubbard, I'll let you weigh in, of course, but I think it's a Dan Grumman question too on
Okay.
privacy. I don't know. I don't have an immediate answer for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't either, but I don't like them having access to your
Right.
Canvas.
Well, I'm
I
just
don't know if
thinking,
it's gonna be
you know,
the
like,
case.
if we
Well,
leave our sub plans in Canvas, then how, you know, how would the sub gain
Yeah.
access to the
Yeah.
plans?
Not sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
Well, you'd probably need to email
to-
the sub.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's
something too.
traditional methods that we've done, but some of those traditional methods won't work, right? Because it's going to be a lot of it will be done through Canvas and through WebEx, and so we have a little bit of work to do, but the bones of the plan are there.
Okay,
Yeah.
Would a sub have a specific WebEx code, or would they have to?
Yeah, I'm gonna let ICT kind of work on some of those things, but they need to be able to access the kids,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, okay. Hold on. Thank you. I'm like, wait, where are we? We're all remote to start, and people keep asking if we're required to be in the school building.
So we're working on some communication, and we anticipate that to be going out by tomorrow.
Okay. And that will tell us the answer to that?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I just-
That wasn't clear in my answer? Yes.
No, it was.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. This one's a little bit separate. We'll try and keep them like together. Do you know what remote will look like for night duties, if we're still doing that kind of thing? Like, would we have like a remote conference type scheduling? And that's probably down the road, but if you're a remote teacher for good, right, remote for the whole semester, how are you going to kind of complete your night duties, if you will?
We haven't really talked about conferences, but one thing that I approved just recently was a back to school night, a virtual back to school night. It was actually for Apache. And so
Awesome.
I do anticipate schools having back to school nights or open houses that would be done virtually. And I don't see that any different with the remote only kids. You know, they might have art fairs, they might have, you know, music concerts of some sort, the elementary level. So I anticipate those will still happen. Maybe some in person, maybe all virtual. I think schools will be determining that.
All right. Any of you guys want to grab any of these? Or I can keep talking.
I can.
Yeah, thanks.
So one question that we've gotten quite a bit about is just if we're working with the 2-week model of moving from one system to the next. I know these are a lot of what if, but what would happen if the numbers jumped very quickly? You know, say we're hybrid and they jump exponentially higher, would we still wait that 2 weeks? That was a question.
So I think in the plan, and in the communication we originally sent out, I'd have to pull the language specifically, but it does say, when possible, the 2 weeks. So if you had a massive outbreak in a particular elementary even, that particular elementary may shut earlier than 2 weeks. So we said we would always give 2 weeks notice. I can't remember if it said when possible but there is language in there that would indicate it may not be 2 weeks in cases where we couldn't. I mean, I can try to find that language, but I know that it says that.
Okay.
Is there anything else?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, we're going through our notes, trying
Well,
to.
we-
Did you like
We're
pull
trying
out
to
a
decide if
list
something
that I
to talk
didn't
about
see it?
now or late, you know what I mean? Like, okay, can we do, do you guys have any ideas on how the principals will expect us to enforce the students to wear masks? I don't know if that's been discussed at all. It's,
Since we're remote only, I would say that.
You're right,
building
that's for
teams
later.
are going to have some time to problem solve that one.
it's a good, yeah.
I don't understand the internet access update.
I think
Is that hotspots probably?
Yeah, I
Oh.
think people are wondering if we found out if there are, if we have families that are gonna need hotspots, or an update on that from, what was his name? Drew?
So I can actually update that one. So yes, we have a solution we're really excited about. I don't know the numbers specifically, but in the hundreds of hotspots, it's actually on the board meeting for Monday night for the purchase of those hotspots. And then there's gonna be an application process for families. It won't be individuals, but for families, because if I have someone at elementary, middle, and high, I can access the same hotspot. And there'll be a process. I believe they're using the same criteria for the at-risk, not necessarily free and reduced lunch is one of those, but there are other criteria that could allow you to get a hotspot. So it's going to be focused specifically on title schools, I think, first. But obviously trying to get to every single kid we can possibly get to. I don't know that we will initially have the numbers. We're hopeful, but we don't really know what those numbers are. We have some preliminary data, and that's what we're working off of. But as you know, what the preliminary data we have some from last spring, and then we also have some from some surveys that we did this summer. And, they change every time, and I think people's situations change daily, right, in regards to whether I have access or not. So I'm excited that we have a solution, and if we find out that we need more, then we'll continue to work for the solution to find more.
Yeah, good.
That's
wonderful.
awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I'll take this one.
Yeah.
Update on students of teachers and staff taking advantage of the child care. And I also want to caveat that, given that you're having communication come out tomorrow about something, specifically whether or not you have to be in the building or not, can people still then add?
Like if they didn't say they wanted it, can they still say they want it?
Because if they're under their, I'm just going to throw a dart that you're saying if you were to say that, yes, you need to be in the building to do this, then people might be like, oh, I was planning on being home for that. Now I need to get my kid in there.
I would think so. I mean, I won't.
Staff learning support system can be made on a week-by-week basis. Rachel, isn't that accurate?
Yes, so I'm personally taking advantage of that. Really excited for that to start. My understanding from Dr. Neal is that week by week you can make that decision. So maybe grandma's coming in town one week and I don't have to utilize it, so I don't have to pay for that week. So you can't pick one day a week, but by week you can select whether you're using it or not. This is my guess. I assume there's still capacity because I believe that Dr. Neal had an idea of the total number of employees who have children in the district, or was somehow able to have a good estimate of that and discuss that number with JCPRD.
I think, yeah, it was like 531 or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think it was more about getting enough people to actually agree to doing it,
Yes.
rather than
To justify the program.
Yeah, rather than there being a limit on
Okay.
who can get in. That was my understanding of it.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Awesome.
If you, I can't type this for this. If you are, people are asking if it didn't, and I don't think this will work now that it's week by week, but if there were open slots, could a Shawnee Mission teacher who has kids in other districts make use of that?
I think that's a Dr. Neal question, and I know that it has been raised, and we can follow up with her about that, and ask if we think we'd have the capacity, and then if we did, I mean, I'm just guessing here, there may be, like, it may have to be first come, first serve, or some way to have a fair system of doing that. So I will pass that along, I'll send her an email right now and see if we can, maybe do a follow-up communication that has to do with, A, what if I still would like to take advantage, and B, what if I have students who do not attend Shawnee Mission schools but are within whatever the age range is. So I'll follow up with her on that.
And probably even more specifically, like I'm thinking about how our spring break's a little different. You know, if with enough planning ahead of time, if, you know, we could have locations that had space that they would be able to accommodate. Specifically like that spring break time.
Oh, yeah, the third week in March? Well, because some districts have the spring break then.
Correct.
Not all. This might have been written like a week or so ago, but do we know if every staff member has been told of their placement and what they're teaching?
So
And if they haven't, is there a time frame?
Yeah, so any staff member who may have had a change from in-person to some form of remote, so either full or partial, was given initial notification last week by their principals. And then elementary principals are sharing that information today, any of those changes. We had hoped that secondary would do the same. The master scheduling has proven to be a little, not problematic, but a little more robust than we anticipated. So I don't think that communication is going to be finalized this week. So I would anticipate early next week we'd be able to finalize those communications, but at least they've been given that initial conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think some buildings or principals have let their staff know that they need to attend the in-service in person. I wasn't sure if that was the expectation, for all buildings, and if all buildings had told their staff what the expectation is for next, Tuesday through the 8th.
Yeah, I'm not sure about what the principals have done, but again, that communication is going to be super clear when it comes out, like I said,
Okay.
tomorrow, by tomorrow.
Okay.
That will be included in
It will
that.
be included.
I'm going to go ahead and share it. So for pre-service, everybody will attend in person for pre-service. And as Mike mentioned, that communication's coming out by tomorrow, but for planning purposes and those listening, that includes both remote and in-person teachers. So for pre-service, all teachers will report in person.
Okay. Yeah, I think our principal shared that it would be like small groups, like we wouldn't like all gather in the learning commons or something.
That is correct.
With the exception of people who have met with HR and have ADA paperwork.
Well, yeah, well, ADA paperwork, and we've agreed to what those accommodations would be.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Okay. So we got that one. Okay, so for elementary specials teachers, art, music, PE, if we go to hybrid, they would be required to teach both like the in-person hybrid students as well as the remote students, and trying to minimize the overwhelming amount of lesson planning if, it looks very different for a remote lesson versus a in-person lesson. For instance, in art, making sure, can the kids at home find all the materials they might need for the lesson that they're going to do? Or, do you have, how maybe principals or the district can address that kind of issue?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I know that Linda and Dr. Hubbard had a really good conversation, and the C&I department has put together a plan, and I'm guessing Michelle can elaborate maybe a little more than I can, but through the instructional coaches, through our coordinators, I know that there will be a concerted effort to support those specialist teachers for that, additional labor that they're going to have. So I don't know, Michelle, if you want to tag on that a little bit.
Yeah, I would add in the pre-service calendar, I believe it's August 27th, and then again on September 2nd. Don't quote me on those dates, but there's a full afternoon one time and a full morning on one of the days where we have grade level teams and content level teams district-wide that are working together to help collaborate and work on specific Canvas lessons and modules to create those. And we've assigned, like, for example, we've assigned a first grade team the first 3 weeks of Engage New York. And then we've just assigned a different first grade team the first 3 weeks of Wonders. And so it's no different for the specials. We have a special schedule and a core schedule for that collaboration time. They can meet in person. They can meet, they're going to be able to connect virtually if that's what they need to do. There's a facilitator for each room. Those facilitators are mostly teachers and or instructional coaches or innovation specialists or librarians or whoever the case may be. But a lot of them were, I don't know about a lot, but many of them were part of the reopening plans when possible. Always coaches when possible, innovation specialists when possible. So that plan is actually going to principals. Principals know this, but they haven't seen the formal plan. I'm hoping to hit send when we're done this afternoon. I just need to finalize prove my stuff and send that out. But the CNI team has done an amazing job with that schedule. So I feel really good about that. And I'm hopeful that teachers will too.
Will that also be for secondary, or is that mostly elementary?
No, pre-K-12.
Okay.
Now, I have to look at the high school and middle school. I can't remember if we did it by content. We talked about content, we talked about feeder pattern, and then we talked about within a building. So it could be actually a variety of all three of those things. Haven't looked at it today and where we landed, but all of those conversations were taking place.
Good. You want to take that one, Jay?
The one that I'm typing on?
Yeah.
I was gonna leave that one
Oh, for another time.
because it's not.
Oh, yeah,
it's-
'cause we're not gonna be
it's
hybrid
When we
yet.
come, it's an in-person question.
Yeah, that's true. Some of these are.
That's why I was typing down the rest of my thought on it, so that later I could remember.
I think that's probably.
Yeah, I mean, the only one that's really left is a clubs question, but I think that's more of a building.
I don't know if we need to worry about clubs. We probably just need to worry about like getting
no.
kids online and learning. And if we can do remote clubs later on, that would be great to get them more, feel like they're part of a community connected.
Sure.
I think that might be all of our questions.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
We appreciate it. Hey, Stephanie, still there? Just kidding. Wakey, wakey. I think you're.
There we go. I was muted. Folks, I think we have an end time of 5 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and keep us moving. But if you all feel as though you need a 5-minute, just let me know. You guys are together, but I'm going to try to keep us going as long as you're okay with it. But if you need 5 minutes, or if you just personally need a restroom break, go. Folks, we also had next on the agenda, before I have you do some little, group brainstorming, we had next on the agenda just to flag the issue statements that were brought forward and that didn't result in them being IBB'd or TA'd on. but you don't want to lose them, right? You haven't really dropped them. And you all may have them in a folder. They were also on the wall chart and I have them in notes, but I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page about what is existing out there. So as you look at, future agendas, you may want to start taking some of these off the shelf to deal with, if you will. So who's got some notes that may tell us what still remains, issue statements that you did not finish?
Lindsay's going through our
Yeah, I think
Okay.
papers.
we kind of pushed PD a little bit. And then the negotiation process.
Which we'll start digging into tonight.
It should all be over there, Lindsay, I hope.
This one was like
Yeah,
on this wall by itself.
I mean, as far as I know, they're all in there.
Sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
Copy one.
I'm like just trying to remember back.
I mean, I've got grievance procedure.
Oh, yeah.
I've got teaching priority standards.
Professional
Um,
development,
Yeah.
staff meeting.
Well, I think staff meeting,
We finished that one?
I mean, that'll be an ongoing thing where, if, we talked about when they would do professional development during a staff meeting, that we would have like a evaluation type survey
And
for
the-
teachers.
The PDC leaders today in my meeting mentioned
They talked about it.
the
didn't they?
surveys.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I mean, I don't know if that's really something to.
That's kind of just a solution in process, right?
Yeah,
But I still have PD days.
yeah, professional, we talked about professional development, I think. I mean, we didn't wrap it up, I guess.
I think those are the only 4 things that you are continuing to carry over those issue statements. PD days, grievance procedure, teaching priority standards, and the negotiation process, which we'll start to work out tonight. Does anyone see anything I'm missing?
Sounds right to me.
Right, and I think later in your monthly meetings, you may want to designate a time in the spring where, closer to around exchange letter time, you all think about what new issue statements you're going to want to bring forward. And they probably won't be surprising to y'all, and you may jointly decide on them. It just depends. If you're meeting every month, I can't imagine that come March, they're going to be big surprise issue statements. So, we'll just try to keep good notes. And again, when I break you down, do have a little bit of conversation about just organization, but don't let it dominate your conversation. Also, Lindsay, I know you've got a document that through this process over the past couple months with you all, every time you came to, you, meaning the group, would come to a point where you said, oh, we should note that about the process, right? Lindsay, I mean, not Lindsay, I think it was Rachel. Rachel, I think, started a document that you started noting things about the process. We said, note that for when we talk about process. I don't want to look at that list yet, but I would like to look at it when you guys regroup, okay, tonight. So for now, I would like you to just grab a partner, and it doesn't matter if it's district or association. You guys, I think, are all just kind of working as a team. Someone does need to call Michelle. And what I want to do is just give you just like till 4:15, literally barely over 10 minutes, to really just quickly start a list of what worked well. Don't limit yourself. There's nothing too minor and there's nothing too major, right? What worked well, and then what were the things that stand out to you that need improvement? Even if you can't articulate them perfectly, try to make a note of it. So, go ahead and grab a partner. So you're going to be teams of 2. You're going to have till 4:15, and then come back, and I'm going to have, you and your partner share the list with the larger group. And we'll see what starts to surface. And hopefully that'll also give us time to go into the list that Rachel started compiling around processes, and then see what all's on the table for us tonight or to pick back up next time. So grab a partner, mute yourself, pull close. Who's going to call Michelle?
Do you want to call Michelle, Lindsay?
Somebody partner with
can.
Michelle?
Do you have her number?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And guys, I'm going to mute and turn off my camera, and I will come back at 4:15 to hear report backs. Remember, brainstorming is quantity, right? So just top of your head's okay. Just get them out there. What worked well? What could you have done better?
Cool with Google Doc? Yeah, that's fine. Okay.
Michelle, I'm gonna FaceTime you.
We're good.
Lindsay's walking back to the
Yeah,
table.
I think we're good.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. And yeah, Lindsay's coming back. Okay. I want to think about I think I'm just going to maybe capture some notes on a Word doc just so we've got them to refer back to if we need to as you guys are doing your report backs. And then after report backs, let's see how many things were talked about that also might be related or coincide with Rachel's process list that she was creating as you were bargaining. And then just sort of go from there. So what team would like to give a report back on what you think went well and what you think could go better in terms of process? Who wants to go first?
I'm just kidding.
I'll go first.
All right.
Yes.
Well, Russ.
Good job, Russell.
They're all John's. So some of the things that we thought worked well was walking through the process as a team. So obviously that's the IBB process for the first time, and we thought that worked very well. Being able to have questions asked and answered in a timely manner. We felt that led to better collaboration. The mood, the tone, not a lot, wasn't as tense as in past years. John said I did a great job of explaining the available money. No, he didn't say that. He did say laying out the dollars and being able to understand what is available for the compensation package. And then things that we could do better, this was mine, and it was kind of out of our control this year, but the sooner the compensation package is determined, it's so much easier on my staff. I would, big shout out to my payroll and HR and IT. They've been working extremely hard to get all the compensation packages, and I would say they got them all done. So your teachers will see that. Counselors will see it. Well, they're seeing it today. It's August 20th.
Yeah.
And then you guys are good to go for September 20th. But then all our classified, we got our retros done and everything. But they really worked hard to do that. So
That's awesome.
the more time we can get, the easier it is for all our team to process. So that's our.
So I've got that captured as in what worked well. You said walking through IBB process as a team, questions were asked and answered timely, which led to better collaboration, not as tense, laying out dollars and understanding what's available was good. And then I think the last thing you said is, the sooner the comp package is determined, the better.
Yes.
Okay.
You got it.
What do you all think could have, let's keep going on what worked well, and then we'll come back to you on what could have worked better. Who wants to go next on what worked well?
Just go
Yeah,
around.
Jill and I can't, or Jill and I.
Oh my God.
Jill, Rachel and I.
She's confused who she is too.
Take it as a
Terribly.
Yeah, okay, so I'll do a couple, you can do a couple. For pros or positive things, we liked having a facilitator. So thank you, Stephanie. That was great. It helped, I think, also with the mood and the feeling more collaborative because there's like a neutral party. Having agendas is always good to keep you focused and on track and know what's coming up so that you're prepared. I really like having the joint statements. I like putting things out that we all agree to. Also, it was helpful to go back and look at them as reference when we were explaining to our members in the bargaining unit what they were voting on. We had all those joint statements so we could go through and make sure we caught everything that we'd agreed to. So I'll let you go with a couple more pros.
Sure. We liked this format, just streaming the meeting, physically how we're all placed. At first, I personally was very uncomfortable with the thought of being on video, but I think that it makes it a very transparent, accessible process for all of our professional employees. I've gotten used to it over time, and frankly, from just experience from our last year's, I think it's better than maybe just for the people who are able to physically make it, being in the room. So I think as we exit the COVID-19 world, it'd be something to talk about as a team is, do we want to go back to the old, you have to be here to see it, or do we want to continue streaming and utilizing Clayton's amazing services? Thank you.
Yep.
We liked breaking into small groups for really meaty topics. Because I think every group coming out with like a new and creative idea, and it just is a quicker discussion, more back forth. And, it's something I didn't mention to Jill, but I just thought about is I think our shared document sharing has worked really well. I think it's more transparent, it's more about teamwork, get stuff done more efficiently. We're not trading documents all over the place, and everyone has equal access to them. I think is good. Do you want me to talk about things we thought we could do better?
Yeah, sure.
Let's go ahead, let's come back to that, because I'm on the list of the things that worked well, then I'm gonna
Okay.
loop back through all the teams on what you can do better.
Okay.
So what's the group that wants to do, what do you think worked well?
We can
And
go
Rachel,
next.
I've got from you, let me just make sure I've captured it right, that Rachel and Jill, you liked having a facilitator, it helped with the mood, to have a neutral party. The advanced agendas helped to be prepared. Issue statements were helpful. It was good to capture what you jointly agreed upon to look back on. Streaming the meeting was okay, COVID or not, perhaps continue streaming. And you liked the small group breakouts for meaty topics. And the document sharing worked well, more transparent and equal access. Did I get it?
Yep.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, who else is going on? What worked well?
Mike and Jay next. I think the pinpoint a couple of things, also the trust building, the breakout groups. I think committing to the ongoing meetings throughout the year took some of the pressure off, knowing that if it's something that isn't immediately needed, that it will be documented and discussed later. Lunchtime was good. Hey,
We just like, yeah, we clarify it.
clear. I was good. Yeah.
You mean
just
eating
like,
together?
Yeah,
Being
like,
together,
go out.
kind of being, not,
you know,
not
find out
formal.
more about them. You know,
Yeah. We're
getting
people,
some
we're
food
all
into you.
kids.
You know, yeah.
Or maybe it's just Jay and I, but we like it.
Yeah.
It's like when they ask you, what's your favorite subject in
You have
school?
to
and
add
you say lunch.
to that.
Yeah.
the whole
I'm just kidding.
movie
I think
what
lunch is
other
great.
people had for lunch.
Oh.
You know, like, there were times when I was really sad, I did not have Chipotle. Like, we're gonna be honest.
We can work on that.
I think we also like to hit on the transparency and the accountability of the live streaming, and that we like the setup of the, and in a post-COVID about, bringing it even a little closer, and just kind of the continuing of the team, good team building and stuff like that.
Yeah, we certainly don't have to sit this far apart when it's no longer a safety measure.
For sure.
Right. Okay, awesome. So I've got from your team that the breakout into the groups helped build trust. The commitment to ongoing meetings took some pressure off. Lunchtime was good, eating together, relationship building. Dr. Hubbard said seeing everyone else's food. Transparency and accountability of live streaming was a positive. Did I get it all?
That's it.
And there's one more group. It's in there.
Mine
Lindsay,
and, I think we have quite a few things that have already been said, but the two things that I think that we had that haven't been said is, I think because we're both visual learners, we really appreciated the chart that said, these are the things we're going to negotiate, these were things for discussion, and these were the things that, it was that, I'm really a teacher, there's 3 charts where then these were things that dealt with money. So having that visual and being able to check things off as we made progress, we thought that was something that we did well and keeping us focused and on track. And then the other thing is really sometimes not easy discussions where we were like, this is something we're negotiating versus this is something we're discussing. And since I'm last and this is my last one, we also said that that's also something that we could do better. That we did it this time. We said, we're not going to negotiate that, or we are going to negotiate this. And so we did it, but we also think that we could do it better moving forward. Just knowing the process now and understanding issue statements better and moving forward, we think we can be better at that too.
Okay, so let me read that back. I think you said charting, where you had the flip charts that defined sort of the nature of the issue and which process you were going to use on that issue, helped you keep track.
Yes.
And then defining what you're negotiating versus what you're discussing. You like that you did it, but you think there's room for improvement.
Yes.
And then
Okay.
we had a lot of things that other people have already said.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear them, Lindsay, if you want to tick through them, just so we'll see what's
Sure.
sort of repetitive, what's coming up as real consensus around.
We liked just our process around communications, that they were joint communications, and the process that we kind of finalized as far as distribution. We also felt like we did a good job of keeping records and having everyone have access to all of that. We also really liked lunch and getting to hang out and, get to know each other as people, and just that relationship building, feeling like that helps us be more of a unified team. And I think that we felt like the YouTube recording was nice. I know on the NEA side, when people had questions, it was really easy to say, oh, we talked about that on this date. Go watch the recording and all of your answers are there. So we felt like that was something that was helpful.
Which is that kind of different than live streaming, right? You put the live stream on a YouTube recording on the NEA site. Okay.
live
So then
streaming-
I've added in joint communication to stockholders and members was a positive. And I think it's in line with what Rachel and Jill said, good documentation or good use of your document folders. And then I added the YouTube recording on the NEA site was useful. Okay, can we go backwards now? Lindsay and Michelle, what did you have that could have been better?
I think we honestly kind of struggled with this, but again, that whole notion of we're going to negotiate this, it needs an issue statement, or maybe it's just something that we need to discuss. So I think in the tabling of items up front, knowing what we're really going to negotiate and what we're really going to just discuss. And then the only other one we had, Lindsay, unless I missed something, is we could be more efficient with our time. That we spent a lot of days on negotiations and maybe we could be more efficient.
Did you guys talk a little deeper about that? Can you give us any thoughts you had around it and or examples that would help us think, generate our thinking on it?
I know one example I had was just, there were times where I felt like, and I think it's all just a learning process, where we all kind of were like, okay, we see the solution, we're ready to go, we've got it, but, we really are trying to work through the process to learn it. We're just like our kids of I got it, let's move on. So for me, that was something, that was difficult.
So sometimes you might have felt as though the solution was there, and you could have moved to it a little quicker.
Mm-hmm. But there is that piece of, we just have to practice the process.
Yeah, and then guys, I have to tell you that some of that is mediator, facilitator, lack of working in your industry. Sometimes you guys have to get comfortable enough to me to say, Steph, we're on the same page. You know what I mean? You mean if I'm teasing something out too much because it feels complicated to me, but for teachers and others, it's a simple issue, but I'm maybe overcomplicating because it's not an issue that on a scale of 1 to 10, I don't know, So you guys feel free to tell me. You guys, it's sort of two-way communication. Let me know if you guys are ever there. Yes, you're learning the process, but as you learn it, you're going to get better at saying to me, we're good, moving on, right? So, okay, good. So then better use of time in terms of just, moving through the process appropriately each time.
Can I add one more thing too, the delineating issues? I think maybe just as a team, having a discussion about, the way NEASM wrote our issue statements of we know for sure that we don't expect this to be contract language, but we want to document everything that we might want to discuss, where the districts was more around contract language, and not just hey, we want to talk about this. So I think that might be something for us to discuss as a team, just Because it did look like we had a lot more things, and a lot of it was just, let's talk.
So it's kind of the question, does everything go on an issue statement? And then a process question, does everything go on an issue statement? And if it does, early on, move issue statements that aren't negotiable to discuss and move it to a negotiate column if not, or maybe everything doesn't go on an issue statement. Okay, I'm just flagging it. Don't have to go deep on it yet. And then, so I've got categorize issue statements or as discussion, negotiate in advance, does everything go on an issue statement? And then could have better use of our time, moving to the process, maybe more appropriate time-wise. You guys have anything else that could have been better?
No.
Okay, awesome. I'm sorry if I'm rushing. I want to get everybody's in, and we only got a half hour, and I still want to get through Rachel's list. And I think everything's out there, this may be something you guys pick up any action on the very beginning of your next meeting. But what other team wants to go through what could have been better?
So I think Jay and I will go, and I think what's promising is that we had 10 or 11 what worked well, and we really had to struggle to come up with 3 things that we could improve on, but we did. And so one of them was just acknowledging the end of the day fatigue, through those longer sessions and kind of being transparent about that with each other and gritting through it and working through it and just acknowledging that piece. And not that this is a bad thing. We feel like we do have culture and trust, but to continue to build on that, to continue, not to rest on our laurels, so to speak, but to continue to make sure that we acknowledge that we have to work on that process. And then I think this speaks to Lindsay's point on just defining what's going to be a discussion and what's going to be mandatorily negotiable, and then sharing kind of the back and forth. It's Shawnee Mission NEA, and then it's, a district issue. And so kind of that shared process moving forward. But it also acknowledging the fact that this year was such a transition, a shutdown, a pandemic. There was some meaty things that just had to be discussed before any other work could get done.
Yeah. And truth is, I feel as though if you all would have been, either party would have been really hardcore about that's not negotiable, or we don't want to discuss it, or we'll talk about it, but no contract language, it would have really been a big hurdle. Right. So I've got to say, just in terms of you all getting it done, building the trust and the relationships you have, it was very nice that you all had enough trust in the process to go forward with discussions that you weren't sure which they were, right? Contract or not. So that really sort of laid the ground for you all to not have your defenses up and have a big hurdle to get over in the beginning. But what you're saying now is you'd like a little clearer process to know, now that you've got some comfort level, now that you've been through it, you think it might make more sense to sort of define, discuss versus negotiate clearly and earlier. And then I've also heard you say acknowledge the end of day fatigue. And are you saying kind of adjust if necessary?
I think so.
Yeah, and I think, as we get to know each other a little bit better, it's easier to spot when I think, so there were some times where we got towards the end of the day, and I think if we knew each other better, it'd be easier for us to be like, you know what, this is going down here quickly, let's just stop and tackle this another time.
Yep. And then, and again, I'm not in the room, guys, so feel free that, I work for you all. You all tell me also if you're ever there and I'm not realizing. You've also got continue to work on the relationship and trust. And I kind of put here, don't take for granted, because I think what I heard you say is, look, we're building it, but we want to, continue to build it. And I think that means the awareness that it's a constant process, just like in any relationship, to, don't assume that it's always going to be given regardless of, of the situation or behavior, if you will. So just be careful, treating your relationship and your trust, treating it as though it's fragile, because, it really always is. And then I heard you say, again, I think you're repeating what Lindsay and Michelle said, a shared process of negotiate versus discuss. I capture y'all's stuff?
You did exactly.
Okay, awesome. There's somebody else to go? Is it Lindsay and, is it Rachel and Jill?
Yeah.
Who else? Okay, what do you think we could have done better?
and I know that this is because of COVID and the restrictions on you, but I would have loved to have been able to have you in person as well, just being able to see what that was like back in March. And not that it was like drastically different, but I think you would have been able to like maybe see our body language or different things, you know, that you might have maybe couldn't see because you were virtual. But I understand obviously that was special circumstances. So whenever, when, right? Not if. When.
Right, when. Right.
Person, yeah.
I've got to tell you guys personally, I was so resistant. I was very resistant to mediating virtually. In fact, I told our agency director and my executive manager out of St. Louis, I remember when I was in denial back in March, and I kept saying, look, I'm just pushing all my mediations, all my interest-based bargaining, I'm just pushing it out. I'm just, you know, if they can wait, I'm waiting. And I would give her these arguments about how I really have to be in person. I just couldn't visualize. So much of negotiations and bargaining and facilitation is kind of intuitive when you're in the room with people. And I know that also sometimes I can come off really, I'm just going to say this, sometimes I can come off a little fast and cold, but I think when I'm in person, you can see there's more than that. But sometimes on the phone or even visually or electronically, I've had to like think about how I be slower and softer. And I don't know if I've nailed it yet. In person, people get that bit of me because you also get those little break times with me too, you know? Right. So I turn off my computer and walk away for breaks, and we don't get to know each other as well. So I hope that I can be back in person as well. Finally, my boss just pushed me out of the nest and said, you're going to do it. Okay. But anyway, so we have had from our agency that they think we may not be in person until January 2021 is when a big revisit is going to be done. So in the meantime, I am here, but I will love and be happy the day I can see you guys.
One of the ones we had, I think, was similar to what Russ was saying, was being able to start the discussions of compensation. Like, you know, when can that process start? Does it have to wait for other factors? You know, the sooner I think we can start is always probably the better. And then not knowing about health insurance increases, that was something that I don't know that has happened in past years really, because I think the health insurance groups have met in April. Of course, this was a different type of year. So, but that was something that, you know, put us on edge a bit, not knowing what to expect for that.
Okay, so what I heard from you all is you would have loved to have facilitation in person. You'd like to possibly be able to start compensation discussion earlier and perhaps more advanced information on health insurance if possible. So I'm kind of hearing you say the more you know and the earlier you know it, the better you'll be able to do. And that might require some conversation about, once you start scheduling for next year, advanced communication with those committees and the folks that are responsible for Russ and crew that are responsible for compensation and health insurance as you're figuring out your bargaining schedule. Did I get it?
Yeah, I think the compensation is always difficult because there's, you know, information that we're waiting on, and some years it may be really difficult to get it done. I'll use the word timely, but where we have information, we have health insurance information. You know, I think it would be good if we can try and get it done so that we're not having to do retroactive pay and all the things that create additional work, if possible based on the information that we have at that time. And I would just add, and I've been trying to think through this, I would like to set up a system that avoids us getting into having to identify things as mandatorily negotiable or not. Because I don't like how that implies a level of importance to either the board or to our professional employees, right? Well, that's not mandatorily negotiable, so that's, and it also, again, I feel like turns me into a bad guy, which I don't want to have to be on this team. So I think as we address that, we just need to think about how do we marry that with the legal framework in the Professional Negotiations Act that says that we have to do these notice letters by March 31st. What are we going to do with those? Is there a way? Because the only consequence for a school district employer under the act is that if you agree to talk about something in negotiations, and maybe it's not negotiable, maybe it's something just totally whatever, a discussion topic, and then you talk about it, and then you hit the unfortunate situation of impasse, which I hope never happens, in our team's work, then you've agreed to negotiate on it, becomes an impasse issue. And that's why, as a school district employer, you're supposed to watch those things so you don't go down that slippery slope. And I think we can probably set up a process that just, we don't have to go there, but we can still be mindful of the legal framework, if that makes sense. And I'm going to continue to think on that in a way that doesn't require us, I still think it's good to label things as we know we're talking about potential contract language or a potential discussion item. So we know what we're talking about in the end goal for that discussion. But to just maybe not have to be putting a stamp on something as mandatorily negotiable or not, unless it absolutely, we're at a point where we have to do that, if that makes sense. It's the end of the day. I'm trying to articulate it the best I can. I'm going to keep trying to do some creative thinking on that.
Well, I think these monthly sessions are going to help that anyways.
I think so too. I think because we're not pushed up into the next year's looming in months or even weeks, hopefully that's not an issue.
So Rachel, you sort of added on to Jill's report. I think I heard you say you sort of built on what Jill was saying about more advanced information on health insurance if possible, being able to start compensation to discuss earlier. And you kind of added, because you could avoid retroactivity and make decisions with more knowledge. And then you said you want to avoid a hard call on negotiable or not, but there is that sort of legalistic component that you also want to avoid issues that are non-negotiable from going to impasse. And I also heard you say something like maybe more understanding around how we deal with letters or exchange of letters, or were you just referencing the exchange of letters?
Yeah, and maybe that's something we talk about in March, right? Maybe at our March meeting we say, where are we? Do we have things? Do we each want to, what do we do with that? How do we meet that requirement? We all, and protect the parties that we represent adequately and be fair to both of those parties. And maybe that's something we discuss then based on how negotiations have gone that year. For example, maybe we say, we've got mostly done. This year, we're just going to notice up to each other compensation. That's the only mandatorily thing left. Maybe we say, well, we each are going to do one of the statutory topics. We'll each pick one, and we'll do compensation. I'm trying to think of, and I don't have it all quite solidified in my mind yet, but maybe it's just something that in March we sit down and say, what do we want to do about this issue that we have to deal with, which is the statutory requirement for notice letters? What does that look like? And then what do our sessions look like following that?
I think before we get too deep in the weeds with that, that's something our UNICEF director, Kevin, would definitely, for me personally, I'm like, Kevin needs to be in the room for this conversation, because he is our go-to, especially with any sort of legal, that type of stuff. So yeah, that's just maybe a note we need to put in there that for that conversation, Kevin Scarrow definitely needs to be able to be in the room and part of the discussion for that.
Yeah, certainly I would be interested to hear how other teams do it, how other teams who use IBB marry up the Negotiations Act with the IBB process, because the IBB process is very procedural and I don't know what rigid and how things are supposed to be done. IBB is much more free, it allows for much more free discussion. And so, what is an issue statement versus a notice letter? What does that mean for us as a team? What should it mean for us as a team? Are they different? Are they the same? Those are sort of the questions that I have about, the process.
Yeah. I've always thought of the notice letter as some umbrella categories, and then issue statements come in under those umbrella categories. But, it's making me think, I know John Rasmussen is one of our mediators that does all of Western Kansas and all of Southern Kansas. And then myself and Commissioner Jim Albano, we do anything that's within, 2 hours of Kansas City in the state of Kansas in terms of school districts. And I'm wondering if John, myself, and Jim may think about getting some sort of expertise folks, whether it be legal counsel or whatever, and maybe doing like a Zoom Q&A on some of these basic questions that come up. Because when you all ask me, what do other districts do? As a mediator, we have such a fine line on not doing anything that appears to give you legal advice, just for liability for our agency, and because later it can come back as I gave advice that wasn't neutral. So we're not allowed to give advice. Our trick around that is, if I will ask you a question, if I want to give you some advice, I'll say, have you thought about blah, 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 right? But around this stuff, it feels as though we could probably find some speakers, neutral folks, or people out of either camp that have their head in this a little deeper, to do sort of some Q&As around common questions that come up from you all and some of my other IBB groups. And I'm sure from John and from Jim. Now, Jim Albano, my colleague in Kansas City, is an attorney and does a lot of public sector and Kansas negotiations. And then John Rasmussen is a neutral mediator now. He used to be with KNEA. So, I feel as though we could pull something together for the districts in Kansas that are doing IBB that might answer some of these commonly asked questions, or at least give you more info to chew on, maybe this winter or early spring before letters are due. So I'm just kind of making note to myself that might be like a training we can offer via Zoom for multiple districts.
And
and it could be also an opportunity for you to like just dialogue in breakout rooms or whatever with other districts that are doing IBB,
Yeah, I think that'd be great. And I don't love this because I feel like we're kind of talking about worst case scenario of like, because I don't see how this really matters if we end at an agreement, right? I don't love it, but I also want to set us up for success and make sure we're all on the same page, which I think kind of goes back to Dr. Hubbard's comments at the beginning. So.
And in private sector, my 17 years of bargaining, mostly private sector, generally one side or the other, generally the employer side, would, the employer council may be willing to explore. They'll just sort of announce up front, look, we don't think this is mandatory, but we're willing to have an exploratory conversation. And that's usually in the notes and of record.
I can do that if nobody like throws anything at me or says mean things about me being an attorney. I just don't love because I don't want the implication to be that topic's not important.
Right.
Okay, so then I'm going to just the argument should we go to impasse. You know what I'm saying?
But I think though, if we, there could be something where we problem solve an amazing solution that's not based in contract language at all.
Right.
And if we cut ourselves off to it's not mandatorily negotiable, so we're not going to talk about it, we risk, I understand the risk of going to impasse, but we also risk doing something that's really amazing for our school community and solves problems.
Right.
And the other flip side of, if we feel that it is mandatory.
Right. You would need to know, right, like there may be topics where either way, right? And I agree, Lindsay, we should have room for all those discussion topics and not cut off because it's not mandatorily negotiable. I think my concern goes back to just making sure that I am doing my job representing the board so that if, I would never want to have put the board in a position to say, well, we agreed unknowingly agreed to negotiate on something that we wouldn't because we don't view it as mandatorily negotiable. That's my only concern. I think there's lots of good ways to address that without harming our ability to talk about all those other things and come up with great solutions for everybody. And I like that this team allows for that as opposed to past ways that we did negotiations, because I think that those issues sat and didn't get solved because there wasn't a board teacher collaboration group in the format that it is now. So
I think the process that played out this past summer was a prime example of how it can work and should work.
Yeah.
Right. I will tell you, there were some topics that were a little stingy at the beginning, at least for me to start the discussion. And we ended up with a great solution, right? And a good conversation. So I think we've proven it can work, but I do, as you might suspect, agree with Rachel that we have to have a mechanism in place to make sure that we're not putting the board in a challenging position too. So, yeah.
I'm
So
gonna keep
guys, I'm
brainstorming
just
and I
adding
would
some things that came up. I just, I'm doing notes here. I'm going to share them with Jill and Rachel to send out, and we may pick them up for our next meeting, depending on, where we want to go with this. But I'm adding that, the NEA Uniserv input, because NEA has counsel as well. And just like you all, two heads are sometimes better than one when it comes to, counsel. Exploratory issues can be good because non-negotiable problems can be solved in amazing ways. And you guys, I heard Lindsay say, we don't want to cut ourselves off from those amazing solutions. And then, that's all it. So, I think you guys were just kind of repeating some of that, but did I miss anything there?
No.
Okay. Okay, and I think, is there one more group to go? What could have worked better?
Yeah.
That's for
Russ has the list.
We've already covered our topic. We were just talking about compensation and how we could do that a little bit sooner.
Okay. And did you all have any, Rush, you were on that team, so do you have any, amazing solutions to that?
Well, I think it's going to lend better to next year if we're starting in March and we're not in a pandemic, so that will help considerably.
Oh, yeah.
The other thing that's out of our control is our Kansas legislature. They typically, they can go all the way into May before they determine what our funding is, but we do have, that funding is locked in, but who knows what that pandemic will do next spring.
So some of that's within y'all's control, some of it's not. So I'm just noting that dealing with compensation better, sort of, I heard you sarcastically say, but truly, districts sort of prepared when there's a pandemic. Who knew, right? And then the Kansas legislature, there's some known and some unknown.
I also think we'll have better information regarding benefits earlier than we did this year.
Yeah, I think that hosed us the most.
Yeah, okay. And I do have that on this list. I'm just going to go up and call it health insurance / benefit. Did you say that hosed you the most? That was where you guys had to do some guessing, right? And that's never really comfortable for folks.
Russ's magic 8-ball was broken.
Okay, so I've got this list. You guys only have 9 minutes. What I'd like to go from here is I'd like Rachel to open that document, because several times I and others at times said, Rachel, put that on that process document so we think about it before next time. I'd like for Rachel to remind us what all was she capturing on that when we came across those, so that we can sort of add them to best practices. In other words, what went well, or we add them to, what could be better.
Does anyone know where I saved that?
It's in the 2020, 2021 folder,
Is it just out?
and it's, SMSD2
Oh,
negotiation
thank
process.
you.
It's at the bottom.
Thanks, Lindsay.
No problem.
Okay. Well, that's good. It looks like some of this is marrying up.
What do you got?
So, and this, I think I don't know if I wrote this or we got a little more procedural. And I guess that's a question we have to answer too, is this something we memorialize is our process something we memorialize in writing in anywhere? And if it is it an MOU? Is it some sort of addendum to the P&A, which we couldn't do right now anyway? Just something to start thinking about. Or is it just a document in here that we go back to that's not as formal as an MOU? There's lots of options.
I think we rename it to IBB negotiations process.
Sure.
I just lost my train of thought. Norms.
Yeah, norms maybe, yeah.
And include it as such, knowing that it's kind of a living thing that needs to grow.
Yeah.
And that we don't try and lock it in quite yet. And then we just acknowledge that this is our norms for this for right now, and we continue to build upon our relationship and the process.
I like the idea of
I'm
norms.
going to suggest after we go through this list, I was going to ask you all to just sort of, once I email it out to Rachel and Jill, folks look at it again. And then I think that what, was it Jay and Rachel are saying, like, if there's a need to memorialize it, what is the need, where, and what do you memorialize? I think I'm just going to challenge you all to think about that between now and next meeting, and then come back with what thoughts you had. I mean, you could start with, like, what are the pros and cons of memorializing norms? And it could be as much as values and norms if you wanted to carry some values into the, into the future in your agreement. But I would say that let's hear Rachel's list. I'm going to email the entire list out. And then I think we should just open it for conversation around, memorializing this. And where do you see pros? Where do you see cons? And where do you see the benefits or not when we meet again? Is that okay?
Well, I was going to say, let's kick it to our small teams, like we're talking about how we're doing our file storing and stuff like that.
Yeah,
to talk
we could
about
do
that. And then when we
I mean, I'll just tell you, this is where I don't sound neutral. I like memorialization, even if it's not in your contract, for the simple fact that it is so easy to do a debrief like this after you guys you picked up something pretty darn amazing, and you've done something that no one probably would have dreamed you would do a year ago, where you were. And so to kind of debrief, it's great, but then to not really take the debrief and take the lessons learned and take the areas for improvement, and to not make them sort of living, if they're just in a file somewhere, you tend to forget this is a one-time, this will just be a one-time conversation if there's not something that comes out of it that is sort of living. But that's my personal opinion, not my mediator opinion. All right, Rachel, let me let you go through that list.
Okay, so just quickly, we had joint statements, how we do that at the end of the session. You have speak now or forever hold your peace till the end of the day. We publish at 9 a.m. the following day.
Okay, now let me say that's under your joint communications to stakeholders and members was good.
Mm-hmm.
And so specifically, you guys did hold yourself to timelines. You didn't wait or procrastinate to do it, and more than one person did it, I noticed. Am I right about that?
Yep. TAs, we didn't even mention that as something that worked well, but we had it, I think, I was trying to just take notes as we went through the process, so I or someone wrote that at some point. TAs, getting them into the writing, and then even just the procedure that Jay developed where we just do it right then with an electronic signature. It was so efficient. We're not, again, emails back and forth trying to exchange documents.
So Rachel, on that one where it's signed by both parties, do we want to say like at the end of this, before the end of the session?
Yeah.
Or the day's session?
Yeah, I like that.
I mean, that was kind of what we did currently to just make sure we had everything closed up before we ended the session for the day.
By the way, that's amazing. No other group does that I know of, either traditional or IBB. So I'm writing your TAs at the end of each session and signing electronically immediately was a good thing.
Oh, and our meeting schedule, doing it by month. Like maybe, that's a commitment we have to each other. We're going to do this once a month. Using that as a feedback loop for things that we thought we had a process in place to address the concern. Is it working? What is our survey data?
I'm adding
Yeah,
notes,
please.
just-
Our file share system.
So ongoing meetings to communicate, check in on solutions and process, survey data, et cetera. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, and then I think this one here about the issue of the timeline for the meetings and aligning this conversation with benefits. So just, when will we have sufficient information to start the compensation discussion? And trying to every year see if there's a way to do that so that we're not causing Russ's department to work overtime and delaying increases for classified, if possible.
I think this was an odd year in regards to benefits because we usually have that earlier.
Yeah, and I truly didn't appreciate or understand how the first paycheck for teachers is later than the first annual paycheck for classified. And that's just, I mean, we can't change those facts. That's how it works. And we don't want to put pressure on this team by proceeding with compensation increases for other pay groups. So, is there a way to problem solve that? And then our last was, using a facilitator in person if possible, but we also had some procedure that we had utilized, and I think this would be good, about times when we've said, oh, for that meeting, we don't need the facilitator, that's just a discussion day. And what we do if it gets into an area where maybe one team member says, I'm not comfortable, I really think I need a facilitator. And we did that for one of our meetings. We had an agreement that if somebody says, we're getting into a topic that I'm not comfortable, that we would kind of end the meeting at that time and wait until we could be back with our facilitator.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of, you guys are wanting to sort of protect and trust and the relationship, that if meetings start to feel like they can erode that, it's okay for either party to say, let's get help.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in line with respecting timeline, my kid is going to be on a sidewalk by herself if I don't leave, like now.
Yeah, it's 5 o'clock. Okay, so guys, let's, I'm going to send this to Jill and Rachel. You guys, does anyone have the calendar up? When's your next monthly meeting?
It is September 17th from 3:15 to 5. And I have a joint statement in our new folder if everyone wants to review it. It's pretty short. And let me know if anyone has any edits or anything.
And then I will say that, so Jill and Rachel, I had shot an email to before we started, and I put out this draft of your first monthly meeting agenda. But Jill and Rachel, knowing that you're probably going to want to do a COVID update, and you're probably going to want to pick this conversation up about what's the memorialization of this, if anything, or what actions do you need on this, if anything. Jill and Rachel, do you guys want to put the agenda together for the 19th? Or anything that you think we'll have time for?
Together and do
Yeah,
that.
we can get that done.
And you said 3:15 to 5 o'clock is our standing time, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to let you guys see if that joint statement's okay, and I'm going to go ahead and I think I will leave meeting. I won't close it because Michelle's on electronically, but I think you guys are done with me.
I think you can close it unless you guys want me on the joint statement. I'm good with Rachel, let you.
Okay. Good deal.
Okay. All right. Bye, guys. I will see you in September, and call me in between if you need anything.
All right, thanks.
It's good seeing everyone.
Yeah,
Sorry,
you
I
too.
have to run to
No,
bed.
you're fine. I'm gonna